Hello and welcome to Restoration DIY. It's great to have you here and I hope you enjoy the video. In this episode, depending on how you look at it, I'll be making a hollow form or a vase from a piece of wood which is maybe black cherry. It smells heavily of almonds. Casting 3 colour epoxy resin. So without further ado, let's get into it. To begin, first I cut the timber down the centre. I could have set up a jig of some kind, but that would have taken a while to set up, so I freehanded it instead. That done, I could then cut 2 circular blanks to fit in the casting bucket. As you can see from the offcuts, I've already done the first one, so remembering to turn the camera on, I'll do the next one. Choosing the centre point is a bit subjective. I chose a point where there seemed to be the most relief in the finished blank. After drilling a hole for the steel pin, I located the blank on the jig. Then I did a series of straight cuts, and then finally turned the blank through the blade to get a reasonable circle. The 2 pieces were then ready for casting. So as I said in the video title, this could be a good first epoxy resin project, but that presumes you have the equipment and you've done a fair bit of wood turning. I'll drop some tips in along the way to help you if you want to have a go. A quick check to make sure the blanks would sit in the bucket, and then a wax the inner surface to aid in releasing the blank after it had cured. Then it was on to the casting and this week's sponsor, Tea Expert. They offer a range of epoxy resin products, including this one, Deep Pour, which is mixed at a 2:1 ratio. There's a link to the website and a 10% discount code in the video description. The chosen colours for this project were heavy doses of gold, blue and green. Once added, each batch was mixed for a minimum of 2 minutes. Straight after mixing, I used one of the batches to prime the timber blanks. This will hopefully stop them soaking up the resin. I could have used spray lacquer, as in my last project, but this time I'll be pre-curing the resin, so time isn't so much of an issue. When the epoxy was ready, I added the batches to the casting. The pre-cure process takes a bit of practice. I do it to prevent the colours from mixing. If this is your first time using epoxy resin, then you could do just one colour. This can be poured straight in after mixing. I think purple would have gone well with this timber. With the last drag scraped into the bucket, weight is added to prevent the timber floating, then it's placed into a pressure pot, 50 to 55 psi added, and there it stayed to cure. It's a few days later. The deep pour takes longer to cure than the standard resin. The casting looks good. I was a bit worried when I saw how much the level had dropped, but it was fine. All of the important parts were full. I peeled away the loose stuff just to double check for holes, then I marked the centre at either end and drilled an 8mm hole for the woodworm screw and the tailstock live centre. Then it was over to the lathe. The blank is fixed to the woodworm screw with the base at the tailstock end. This will give access to cut the mortise after the piece has been balanced. First up is the negative rake carbide. It's much kinder to the surface of the resin. Other tools can be used, such as a bowl gouge, but you'll have to keep it very sharp, and I've found that on resin especially with heavy doses of mica colorant, the edge overheats and blunts incredibly easily. Standard carbide can work as well, but this can shatter the surface, creating a lot of work cleaning it up. It was around about now that the workshop was filled with the overwhelming smell of almonds. It actually reminded me of marzipan on Christmas cake. But anyway, moving on. What I'm trying to do is get the blank balanced. It wasn't running that far off centre, but it was vibrating a fair bit, which in the end I put down to there being more resin on one side than the other. Using the negative rate carbide, I began removing lots of material towards the base. I'd made my mind up that this wouldn't be a footed piece, just a straightforward curving line from a narrowish base up into a flared midsection, then sharply round into the rim. The grain in the wood was running in every direction, which looks great when it's finished, but it can be a pain to turn. It can cause terrible tear out, which is why I switched to a large negative rate scraper to try and mitigate the damage. Having got the blank running fairly smoothly, I started on the underside to cut the mortise. This will give me a better fixing option, and I should only have to turn it around one more time, but that didn't quite work to plan. To start with, I faced off the underside. For this, I used the bowl gouge, running the tool into the centre, stopping just short so that I didn't undercut the live centre in the tailstock. With the base flat, I moved on to cutting the recess. The mortise is cut in the usual way. First, a 1/4 inch parting tool to define the outer edge, cutting down to around 6mm or 1/4 inch. A little bit of clean up, then a dovetail is cut with a dovetail cutting tool. This can also be done with a skew laid flat on the tool rest. Then the rest is cleaned out with a bowl gouge, but then I hit a problem. Normally at this point, I would finish cleaning up the mortise, then sand and add a finish, but the other end was being held by a woodworm screw, and the top side wasn't flat, so I couldn't remove the tailstock. The workpiece would have gone all over the place, so I had to turn it around and face off the top surface. Then to save time, I used a 70mm Forstner bit to drill down into the blank. Not only did it remove a lot of material, but I could use the hole on the 4-jaw chuck. Going straight in with a big bit can be daunting, so if you have one, you can use a smaller size, and because the workpiece and drill are in the lathe, you don't have to worry about centering. Also, I don't think I'd try this on a pedestal drill. Keeping hold of the blank would be a nightmare. With the top surface levelled and the hole drilled, I could turn it around and finish the mortise. The reason for doing it now is simple. If I'd carried on hollowing out, forming the rim and finishing the outside, etc., the base would have been left unfinished, because later on I wouldn't have anything to hold on to. Now we're back to where I should have been. I can clean out the remaining waste material, add some decoration, and sand just the underside to 800 grit. Sanding done, I added a wax finish. Base done, and with the workpiece turned round, I could continue shaping the outer surface, beginning with the upper rim section, and because it was mainly wood, I used a bowl gouge. The gouge sliced through the timber with ease, and the smell of almonds was incredible. On top of that, the wood grain that was being uncovered was looking really good. Lots of spalting and changes in direction. As long as I could keep the tear out in check, this was going to be a nice looking piece. So what I'm doing here is roughly shaping the upper section. I'm cutting away the waste to what I think is going to be the outer edge of the rim, then using the carbide to shape a transition curve from the side into the flatter part of the top. But as this develops, I can see there isn't enough depth for the rim and the undercut, so I remove more material, forming the undercut at the same time. Once the proportions of the rim and the undercut were set, I began defining the shape, working on one part, then the other, gradually refining the profile, bearing in mind the golden rule that you can't put back what you've taken away. The flat section in the undercut didn't go with the overall feel of the piece, so I had to do some work adding a soft curve, remembering that I would have to be able to sand it, so it would have to be big enough to get into it with my fingers later on. The tear out needed a bit of work. You can just see it near the base, so out came the freshly sharpened negative rate scraper. Turning the speed up and applying a light touch, I was able to remove some of the affected areas, but a fair bit remained. A quick going over with a skew tidied up the resin midsection, then it was back to clean up the base, and for that there was only one choice left: a super sharp bowl gouge, high revolutions and a light touch. All it took was 2 passes and the damage was gone. The outer surface was now more or less done, so I had to get ready for the hollowing out. My lathe has a feature that allows the headstock to rotate away from the centre line, and that's really handy on a small piece like the one I'm doing. So with everything unlocked, I could turn the whole unit 45 degrees to its next position, tighten up all the locks, and there you go. That's much easier to work on. For some reason I found it quite difficult to get a cut started. The cutters just seemed to skim along the surface. That was until I tried a straight cutting tool with a 10mm carbide head. This broke the surface and then there was no stopping. I cycled through many different tools, but always keeping the cut under control so I didn't pull the workpiece off the chuck. This is the cutter that saved the day. I don't use it very often. The head is angled at 45 degrees into the cut, and I think it was this feature that enabled it to get into the waste material. Once I'd got the inside opened up a bit more, the side cutting scraper came into its own, removing more material, and surprisingly, it didn't catch. So as my confidence grew, I dug in a bit deeper. There really isn't much more to see as far as the hollowing out goes, mainly because of the small aperture and my hands are in the way, so I'll cut out the boring bits and skip ahead. It's a while later and the inside is more or less done. I've taken the wall thickness down to around ½ inch or 13mm, and I've left about 40mm of solid material in the base. I could have taken more out, but it's a balance of effort against reward, and that last bit might well have taken twice as long to remove. The last thing to be done was the rim. I used the skew and the mid-sized carbide to shape the rim. I aimed for something bold to suit the overall proportions, and I think I managed to do that. And then it was done. I sanded both inside and out to 800 grit, then continued up to 3000 grit, just on the resin midsection. Sanding done, I cleaned down with denatured alcohol. Then I applied 2 liberal coats of sanding sealer, each one denibbed with a non-abrasive Scotch pad. Next up, Yorkshire grit. A single application, thoroughly cleaned away until no more residue is picking up on the paper towel. Then it's the resin polishing. First, Merca Polar Shine 10, a single coat, cleaned away, ready for the next stage. Polar Shine 5, another single coat, polished off to leave a deep shine. And to finish, Hampshire Sheen Gloss Finishing Wax. 2 coats, buffed, to seal and protect the surface. That's it, another project finished, and it's a good one. I like it, and I hope you like it too. Easy to do, and the results look fantastic. The 3 colours in the resin stand out against the wood, and there's a really nice 3D effect, which gives the resin some depth. I think this is down to the extra mica powder I added. So let me know what you think. and if you decide to give it a go, I'd love to see the results. Anyway, with that said, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, a thumbs up will be very much appreciated, and comments are always welcome. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.